Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ninth Hour. I'm Michael, and I am joined today by our title defender, Clinton Chan.
Hi.
So, as you might know, Clinton recently won the BSF 2016 that was held at Origins, that we believe was in Ohio this year, and successfully held off the competitors with blue, yellow, green Sword Art Online. Now, might be getting a little ahead of ourselves, but this podcast is brought to you by our partner store, Card Academy. Please make sure to check them out for all the latest and greatest in Weiss Schwarz. And yes, they do have all the cards that you need for SAO 2 Volume 2 in stock. Shameless pandering aside, we wanted to start off this podcast by acknowledging that last week's article might have had a little bit of shortcomings. We did get some reactions that, well, for lack of better terms, were not enthusiastic. And, instead of going into full shame mode, we decided that we would use this as an opportunity to say, challenge accepted, to take up the torch for doing something better for everybody. So, today we prepared a bunch of topics that we wanted to talk about to follow up on the article and also kind of follow up on in the whole scheme of things. And, who better to have but the current reigning world champion help us out with that. So, to that end, we have topics of Origins itself, the deck, the journey that it took to get there, how the event went, and some analysis, which we'll get to in just a second after that. So, Clinton, welcome back. Thank you again for being with us.
Thanks for having me, as usual.
I know that was quite a bit of an introduction, but so tell me about Origins. Like, how did you get there? What was the event like for you? I mean, it just means just the whole convention itself. What was that like?
Well, we took like the cheapest way possible to get there this year. I remember 2 years ago when I went for the first and only other Bushy Road Spring Fest at Columbus, Ohio. We took a Greyhound bus line there, and then took a mega bus back, and that was only about $57. While last time, it was like a $300 flight, and I only took that flight because I had a $300 expiring Southwest voucher.
Ah, wow. That's how long did it take you to get there from home?
On the bus ride on the way there, it took about 8 hours.
Oh my goodness, that's like a full trip from where I am to SoCal. Like Bay Area to SoCal in the car. Yeah, it's about 8 hours. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah, it really is. You can in California, you can drive for 14 hours and still be in the same state. It's kind of crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but man, 8 hours there. How did you keep from getting bored, or did you sleep?
Most of the on the way there was just me fidgeting back and forth, trying to lie across different seats to try to find a comfortable position.
Oh, okay.
It
So
never
that's
really materialized.
yeah, that's the kind of the struggle with being on a bus, huh?
Oh, yeah. But the place we stayed at, the Ref Roof in Plus, which was pretty much like down the street and across from the convention center, so the proximity was really close, and it was actually really nice. Probably one of
Oh,
the nicest two-star hotels I've ever been in.
oh, nice, pleasant surprise, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, well, cool. Yeah. So, also big shout outs to Melanie, who helped run the Card Academy booth during Origins. She slogged through a number of at least, what was it, 15-hour days or something, at least, for 5 days in a row. So, yep, this very same Melanie who helps with the podcast also nearly, got herself run over by a truck of work just being out there. So, big shout outs to her.
Oh yeah, she tirelessly
I
spent
know.
every moment that I was there just constantly buying and selling singles through so many boxes and through so much inventory.
In-house Wonder Woman. Who would have thought, right? So,
Yeah.
all right. So Origins aside, I mean, just so all of our listeners know, Clinton and I have not really had the time to actually consult with each other for this. So all of the extemporaneous stuff that we're doing literally is just on the fly, and that's how we're presenting it. That's what we're sticking with. So let's go to the deck. Now, the deck is something that we actually had tagged on at last week's article as the fifth deck list, and as I understand, it did not change from those 50. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So the list, pretty much as we said in the article before, kind of mirrors the quote Japanese meta build, less all of the promos that we don't have available in English right now. So, Clinton, I gotta ask you, how did you arrive at the 50? Did you take the, as we mentioned in the previous article, a list similar to this list that we have now? It's actually something that won nationals in Japan in 2015, or last year, as it were. Did you go from that list, or did you kind of arrive at this 50 on your own? Take us through how you made that journey of the deck build.
I was aware of that Japanese list, and then I compared it to what I had before.
Mm-hmm.
With my last sword art deck, which was the blue, yellow, and a slight splash of green.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to see the ideas that they were running and see what I was running. But the most important part was pretty much swapping out invites to parties and Star Splash combo with the Mother Rosario and Zek and Yuki, and then trying to figure out, how am I going to bridge all the green cards to color fix enough for green to consistently hit it when I need to.
Right, because level 1 is kind of a precarious time, right? Because we're trying to hit green at the right time, and if some lists want to get really greedy and only run green for the level 1 combo, it can get really dicey. But especially for the numbers, as we saw with our funny but perhaps potentially highly unsuccessful red, blue, green build. Like, I haven't built it myself, and I don't know how it might turn out, but I mean, if we're going based purely on results, we can see that yellow or blue, green splashing yellow is probably a very strong way to go. Though I have to say, I did get a message from one of our listeners, fans, what have you, who had a different take on the level 1 for the same color combination, opting to go for using the old school Imprisoned Queen Asuna to provide a lot more punch at level 1. I heard that made 10th place or so, so hey man, if you're listening, shout outs to you. Well done. The event, though, let's go through the event. So now we know that the way that you arrived there is kind of an amalgamation of, how do we get from what the build was to what you think it should be. What did you fight during the event? I don't know if you got the chance yet to kind of break it down by round, but...
Oh, it was really funny. It was the first 5 rounds was pretty much... It was like a symmetrical, where I actually called the pattern that I was going to play.
Oh, really?
It was round 1 I played against green, yellow Kantai.
Okay.
Round 2 I played against an Ilya Berserker Fate deck.
Oh, interesting.
Round 3 I played against a blue, green, yellow Kantai deck. Round 4 I played against a green, red, Rider, Archer Fate deck.
Interesting.
Round 5 I played against a 4-color Kantai deck.
Yo, 4 colors.
Yep. Round 6 I played against an SAO deck.
Okay.
Top 8 I played against Madoka.
Mm-hmm.
Top 4 I played against Cinderella Girls.
Uh-huh.
And finals I played against green, yellow Kantai, so full Kantai sandwich.
Oh, wow. Alrighty. I mean, it was almost to be expected to have Kantai or something related to do very well in the event. I don't know if it was favored to win per se. It's kind of hard to tell because, I mean, the same kind of thing happens in Magic Arena. You forecast something that's going to win, and it's hard to say, especially if the meta is super open, which in Weiss Schwarz it kind of is, more or less, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult, at least in Weiss Schwarz, I would say, to get a completely meta-breaking deck. I mean, okay, if you play the Japanese game, you'll know that last season we had 4 Marika in Nisekoi, and that was absolutely game-breaking. But prior to that, it was kind of difficult to say, okay, sorry for all of those who played Kantai when that was, the first set. That too. And if we go way back, but you get the point. It's like, it's very rare that you get something super oppressive, and you can more or less reasonably forecast Kantai to be a contender, at least every time, especially because it's won Worlds, at least on the Japanese side, for what, 2 years running at least.
Yep.
But so
Both
that's
from
good to hear.
Taiwan too.
Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting because Madoka is kind of a steady top 8 presence as we've noticed, right?
Yep.
Um, I certainly remember having to play against Madoka during BWC last season, and IMS Cinderella Girls being there in top 4. Did you have to play against your friend? Was that who you played in top 4?
Oh no, we were on the opposite side of the brackets, and we were
Oh, I
almost
see.
close to get the finals that we won it.
Oh, yeah, right, the Dream Finals, right? Where you both get to the finals and then you crush them in 5 minutes or something. Sorry. uh, yeah, so, I mean, just speaking from, like, the general turnout of how, the decks stacked up, do you think that more or less the decks that were, quote, supposed to make top 8 or such made top 8? Or was there any result that surprised you from that?
I thought the top eight had a good cast with the series that you would expect to top eight, minus the absence of AOT. Not a lot of people were playing at this event,
Mm-hmm.
and I definitely believe that if this was a bigger tournament, because Origins, they removed the free entry to the convention, so
Right.
the pay barrier and having to have it as a legitimate trip with hotel and everything made it a big entry barrier for people to join in. So it wasn't the largest of events, so it restricted a lot more people from coming and participating. And
Mm-hmm.
I believed if it was open, there would have been a lot more AOT, and there definitely should have been at least one to two in the top eight.
That's also not to say, everybody, that people that would not have the kind of money needed to enter the convention would be running AOT. It just means that, as Clinton said, it looks like there was just the paywall was a little bit too tall for people to overcome. Okay. I'll see myself out now. Terrible, terrible jokes are terrible. Sorry. We're obligated. Okay, just so everybody knows, ever since we all like met in person last year, we've been kind of obligated to make at least one terrible Attack on Titan reference and joke like every time we do this. It's true. It happened like either every night that we were there, somebody would make this terrible AOT joke, and it just kind of became its own thing. Anyway, meta jokes aside. So I'm sure that if you're listening to this and you've gotten this far in the cast, you'd like to hear a little bit more analysis about the deck, and so we're going to do just that. So, Clint, let's go first into changes in the deck. Do you think that the 50 would be say the same or different if you say had to play in a BWC? Let's say that we're going into the winter or fall season of Weiss Schwarz. Would you make any changes to the list that you ran?
And I think the only change I would consider making was making maybe going a 3-3 split of the traditional bomb silica and the clock bomb Yuki at level 0.
Oh, why is that though?
Because it's very useful against Kantai,
Uh huh.
and I feel that having one more of it would be really helpful in that matchup.
Okay. Now I'm just gonna delve a little further, just so that our viewers might know a little better. What specifically do we need to do against Kantai that the Yuki reverser or stock is it clock reverser? Clock reverser becomes more necessary.
It's really good at getting rid of their pretty much their lead level 0 plays that are efficient. When they get reversed in battle, especially the Inazuma and the Hibiki.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can deny your opponent both kind of their level 0 engine with that, right?
Yeah, like in round one, my opponent had played two Inazumas and the same Yuki clock bombed them both because she has hand on
Oh,
court.
that's right. Oh wow, that's got to be a beating, huh? They don't get to search for any of the level 1, and Shimakaze becomes that much more difficult to set up.
Hmm.
Yeah, that seems really good. All right. Well, you heard it here, guys. There we go. Just maybe a 3-3 split. I mean, it's hard to talk about issues that a deck might have, especially if you win an event. And this is not just limited to WS, right? It happens with all the other card games that we might imagine, right? I mean, if you look at the World Series of Poker and you see what kind of hands have won like the whole tournaments, right? You look at it and you go, oh, what the heck was wrong with that hand? But to that end, did you run into any kind of issues throughout the tournament with the deck? And if you did, what were they?
I felt that in this deck, like more so than the older green yellow build, I mean blue yellow build, that starting your turn at 0.6 before clocking is a really hard decision on which route you have to split between green and blue.
Because you're not sure whether you need to beat down with like Clock Encore or whether you need to just go off right away with the combo.
Yeah, because sometimes you might not have enough, comfortable with enough stack to go towards the Yuki, and also
Hmm.
since she's so small and most of her power, the turn she comes into play, is dependent on the number of other characters you have,
Yeah.
including herself, in play.
Hmm.
That you have a bunch of you have clock on Corsinons, your assassin Gyarados, and her. You just can't play everything, and
Right.
you're gonna have a really awkward board.
Right. So it would say that the board state is going to be rather fragile. It sounds like a lot of the time, not necessarily so much on your turn, but on your opponent's turn. Especially if you've done a lot of trading. Especially if you use the assassin Kirito and whatnot. Right.
Hmm.
Okay.
And then, of course, as usual, and the gold bar book combination of climaxes is a super, feast or famine combination where it either goes fantastic or you hit horrific scenarios of gold barring into book and booking into books and or booking into more gold bars. Like you could really easily go from I have 8 climaxes in deck to oh my god, I'm now out 6 and I'm about to refresh
Refresh.
with only like 3.
Yeah. I remember when I once played a green blue Madoka deck, and this was on the Japanese side of the game. My lowest, or my record, I should say, was refreshing with 3 climaxes. I had more than 25 cards left in my deck. It took me about 3 minutes to lose.
Oh
it
wow.
was it was really bad. I looked at my opponent. I'm like, man, you're not gonna believe this, but I'm actually refreshing with 3, and he kind of looked at me like, what?
Hmm.
Yeah, he just turned everything sideways, and I just died. It was pretty bad, especially after he played that +2 soul. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, we gotta say for those of you who might not remember, Clinton really, really hates book triggers. Like, as we said in the article, the only reason that the book triggers and especially the bar triggers like being together is okay in this deck is because the Yuki combo fixes all that. You can pay those books out and you can discard those bars, or vice versa and whatnot, what have you. Even though I guess it's harder to get a bar into stock unless you bar your bar. Oh,
Yeah.
that's happened to
Well,
me.
it happens. It happens a
Yeah,
lot.
it does happen. Like it can happen, and because you have a 4-4 split in this deck, it's much more likely to happen. And if you go for your refresh and like, where's my last bar?
Yeah. And like in
Yeah.
this deck, this is like the only deck I would ever dream of playing book and bar.
Exactly, because I was going to say, man, Clinton, the person on in the U.S. who absolutely hates books and bars together the most, actually
If
use
yeah,
this.
if last shot was the climax return trigger and not a book, it probably is the best deck in the English format.
Yeah, but unfortunately, they have to keep it a little bit more even, right? You have to get that
Yeah.
variance. The higher variance kind of, helps it even out, even though when it goes off, like, it goes off, and it looks
Hmm.
really good. So, okay, there we have deck issues. So, matchups, I know that we talked about it a little bit, kind of with Kantai, but, I mean, there are, a myriad of matchups that we could talk about here, right? But I would say that there are some, I guess, things or matchups that are going to be at the top of people's minds. So I'm just going to throw this one at you, and I'm going to say, what do you think about the mirror match? That's like the most difficult one to do. How do you think this deck fares in the mirror, and what matters the most? If you're playing against almost the exact 50, Like, what would you say is the most important thing to kind of rely on, and what should you be doing?
Uh, in the mirror, you gotta hopefully be more efficient and stay ahead of your opponent. Like it's not bad having two gold bars in hand because once you get the Yuki combo, you just search for another Yuki and just keep the Yuki train going. So you constantly have your game plan going forward and then set up to eventually, hey, my level threes will hopefully push in more damage than yours.
Yeah.
And also, it's one of those things where you have to have a good read on your opponent on do I expend resources to search for my backups and do I bait out theirs?
Ah, yeah, that's true, right? Because I mean, if you go over by 2,500, you're pretty much favored because you know that the deck is probably not going to be able to push more than 2,000
Mm-hmm.
on the backswing. But yeah, anything else is kind of risky territory because the Vice Commander Asuna is still being played, despite it being like the OG backup, right? The free 2K, it's still like proven to be good. So
Yeah, like you would think like a Yuki is so small on defense that you would never consider backing her up. But there are times where you have the triple Sleepy Knights Brainstormer, and then your Yuki's in the middle with like something else. It's at a decent like 5,500. People
mhm.
don't expect you to even consider backing it up, and it'll surprise a lot of people because they think, oh, this thing is super small, and they don't realize how much power it can get.
Yeah,
It's still
exactly.
not a lot at 6,500, but a lot of times people don't even think that far.
Right. And to that end, though, the having just it at 65 is actually good enough to at least match up with, say, the core build of Attack on Titan, which is arguably the next most popular set, I would say. Um,
Hmm.
right? Because their sides, if they're using the Levi core combo, the squad combo. Um, I know our friend Riley, the champion from Florida, is a very big proponent of using the squad combo. I know that during the Intercontinentals last year, I got completely wrecked by that. But it does lack, or quote, side lane pressure in that the power level is not allowed to go terribly high once the full squad is active. Um, though, if they're playing the Mikasa combo, that's more or less going to be GG to that. So, regarding this very narrow situation, if you had to face against the 1-0 Mikasa that, kind of springs the 2-2 into play, would you consider ever attacking into it, or would you do what most other people might do? And I'm just saying might do. I don't actually know what uh,
Oh
everybody's
yeah.
opinions in the element. Do you side attack it, or would you actually just call them down and say, "All right, let's go front attack"?
Look, for me, it depends on the scenario. If they're like really, if they're on the lower end of the progression of going from one to two, like a one, like somewhere between 1-1 and 1-3,
Uh huh.
like I would consider I would side attack it. But if
Sure.
they're at 1-5, if they're gonna go to two anyway, you're gonna have to force it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot better to force it out because at that point they just lose a character, and
Yeah.
they lose a character that you probably weren't gonna lose to begin with.
Uh huh. So you
Yeah,
think
because
that
if
they
your
just
opponent, yeah, because if your AOT opponent is about to go to two, there's no point in siding it because that means that they keep that Mikasa. They played the level two Mikasa from hand anyway,
mm-hmm.
and then you pretty much done nothing there. At least force them to do something. At least that's one less free character that they could attack with next turn.
Yeah. And to all of our listeners, viewers, I'd like to apologize in advance because, we only have so much time to go through matchups. I mean, I'm going to say right off the bat, it could be an entire cast itself on each individual matchup. Like, uh, the North American Japanese nationals champion, Bren, he and I could probably just like analyze the crap out of so many matchups for hours on end if we got him here and or anybody could do that for hours. There's just so much to do, but because we have a lot more to go through, we're gonna have to go through just a couple more. I guess kind of the top, two or three most possible, popular potential matchups that we've got. Just because the topic is so rich. You could do hours of research and a lot of playtesting. Honestly, that's where a lot of the knowledge will come from for everybody. Is if you just test against the most popular lists of these series. And what with Disgaea coming out, we're going to be seeing a lot more. Whoops. Variety coming to the game in just a few months before the next season starts. So it might even change what we say here. So that said, we've covered the Mirror, we've covered Attack on Titan. Clinton, what would you say is the I guess next most relevant matchup? We kind of touched on Kantai, and I think we've talked about that one so much before that I might be able to summarize it in just a few steps. Deny them the level zeros with the Yuki reversers. Don't have anything on level 1 if you can help it for Shimakaze to search. And crash, crash, crash. Something like that, right?
Yeah, and Assassin Kiranos are really good against whales if you're playing against people who are a firm believer in blue.
Oh, yeah. The Taige, right? You just crash the Kirito into Taige. The scaling 500. So, what would you say is like the next most relevant matchup?
I think a very important matchup that I think should be doing really well right now, but not a lot of people are doing well with, is Cinderella Girls, the primarily blue and splash the utility cards.
Okay.
Because that they're gonna destroy you extremely easily on their offense. So it turns into a war of attrition on who could keep up, like getting their plays for next turn. But Cinderella Girls. So currently in English, the biggest weakness is their level 3s aren't extremely reliable, and you're slightly favored there for the Sword Art player.
Right, because at level 3, if you're at least playing if you're going by the Japanese kind of modeled build, Mono Blue featuring Ranko has the cannon where you mill 5 and then deal X damage, where the X is the number of climaxes that you milled through that. And also you have the level 1 kind of, quote, snowballing Shimakaze clone. I believe it's Anastasia. CX combo.
The replacer effect.
Yeah. Where you just keep on, you get bigger every time. So you kind of have to light the fuse on the first one and go off of that. So just having awareness, I guess, of where you place your weakest characters on the sides might be one thing to keep in mind there, or just trying to trade as much as possible. Because here's something that we don't go in on very much at the time, is when we discuss decks, we say, oh, this is a level 1 climax combo, this is a level 1 climax combo, use it at level 1. Everybody says you should use it at level 1, but in practice, if you really, unless, like Clinton said, you're starved for resources, and you actually need to get that engine going to maintain your hand, a lot of times people will play kind of a game of chicken between the levels 1 and 2, where it's like, okay, I'm going to go off with my combo first. Oh, you just went off with your combo? Okay, I'm going to go over the top, and I'm going to go in with my combo now. And now you're in an even worse situation, because now you're halfway into level 2, and you're almost into level 3, and you've only got 3 stock. What now? Kind of thing.
Yep.
And, there's a lot more game to be played in the middle, especially now that we have, at least on the English side, characters, like legitimate characters that can come out a level early. Like, yes, we already had it with some Kantai with the Second Fleet, with Tea Time Kongo. Yes, we did have the Kosaki and Nisekoi, who could be played with a different condition. Not if you had 2 pendants, but if you had, I think, 6 or more climaxes. I mean, it goes all the way back to like first set Love Live, the Maki, where you have 6 or more climaxes in your waiting room, or SAO, even the original Lifa, right? We have 5 or less cards in your deck. But those were kind of like nice if you could get them off just like kind of one shot, but they're becoming a lot more consistent nowadays. So level 1 and level 2 have kind of blended together into this. Okay, so if I go to level 1 first, I might be able to go off first, but I need to continue trading and playing level 0s so that my opponent doesn't play level 1s to reverse me and they can search. So it's, who goes first. And kind of the deciding factor of that, with what I found, is kind of who sneaks in more damage. Because when you attack, right, we're attacking anyway to be able to get an advantage with stock and to like 1-4-0 or 1-4-1 our opponent. But sometimes we just go, oh, whoops, flip a soul trigger, and you just nail them for 2 or 3 damage, right? And you're like, oh, I guess you're into level, halfway into level 1, where in our minds we just go, okay, we're just going to get them to 1-3, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, now that I've kind of gone off the handle about that, IMAS is definitely, right now, we could say, underappreciated, I would say, perhaps, in English. Also because the thing is those on the Japanese side of the game, that style of play with mono blue really capitalizes on the consistency of that deck, and that they just want to do those 1 and 2 things, right? Level 1 CX combo go off, level 3 CX combo go off. That's it, and it kind of refresh as quickly as possible to prevent as much damage. But it means a different thing in the English game where we have a smaller card pool. I mean, to put it into, I guess, more perspective to kind of hit it home, in Magic, right, we have a sealed or draft format, which severely limits the full pool of cards that you're able to use versus something like Standard, which is multiple sets, and Modern, which is a lot more sets, or I guess what would mirror Neo Standard best is Legacy. But if we're looking at the card pools for those metagames, right? The English side of Weiss Schwarz is still dealing with a modern card pool, when the Japanese players are used to something with Legacy. They've been around. Those are the OG players that have been, around for years and years. Like, man, I remember when this card was new, that kind of thing. So, yeah. I mean, Clinton, you will be the first to kind of attest to this, that, the game is totally different, but at the same time, you don't really care about what's going on the Japanese side, right?
Nope.
Yeah, exactly. So
I only care about what rarity they're putting their cards, so when they come over here, what I can expect to spend my money in.
There we go. All right, so let's go on. I think we've kind of touched on kind of overall, just by going through the matchups, what the play style might be like, right? You level 0, as we said in the article last week, right, is you just run, you try to build up stock, filter things, brainstorm if you need to, and then level 1 is when the game of chicken really begins, right? Whether you go off with your Yuki combo, or whether you just try to trade off with the Kirito, or if you have an overwhelming advantage, I would assume we would just play our Clogon Corsino and just go to town.
Yeah, you just have a lot of option there. But more often than not, if you have a chance to, if you have the combo in hand, it's preferable that you go with the Yuki Climax combo first, just to you have a head start on setting up than your opponent.
Right, because we can deny a lot of damage that way, right? Because every time we use the Yuki combo, it displaces 3 cards, right? 1 for the stock and 2 for the characters from the deck. So guarantee that's at least 2 cards that we know that we're not going to be taking as damage in the future.
And I would say the playstyle of the deck is just super aggressive because of books and gold bars. You're going to have there's a great chance that you're going to have at least 2 climaxes in hand almost every turn. So you're just playing a game of, if my opponent is, any type of, low on climaxes, they're going to be really punished, and it's going to put them on a really short clock. And it might mess with the way they want to play their game, and then, and it's the type of game you want to play.
So we can say that, like, before the first refresh, the deck really wants to, like, rush the opponent down a bit, but at the same time, it also gets the upside of being able to, like, deny damage and just being able to search out 2 non-climax cards, like, every time it goes off with Yuki. And, like, in its best case scenario, you can actually displace, let's see, 3, you can displace, like, 9 cards that are not going to be damaged. That's more than a full level of potential damage that could be dealt to you that is otherwise going to be prevented, or never going to be taken as damage because you've gone through all those cards already as search cards and clean stock. I mean, fingers crossed, clean stock, right? Alrighty. So the objectives, I think, are pretty clear here, right? So level 0, we just want to keep on setting up. Level 1, if we have the combo, as Clinton said, we want to go off with it. Sometimes just because it can snowball an advantage, it can get you ahead in terms of damage. Not necessarily even the kind of a card advantage it can get you in hand. That's kind of incidental, right? It's like, how much value do you want? Tons, with a cherry on top.
Yeah,
But
you're with the combo. You're never gonna, build a big hand. You're just filtering to be a better hand than what you had before.
mhm.
So that's why I kind of do like that I don't have access to that promo Sinan because sometimes hand size is a problem with that deck
Yeah.
because you're playing a game where with all your characters that come into play and get bigger, you're constantly overrunning their board and forcing them to put something presentable up on their turn. And so you're almost constantly having the first crack of filtering your hand and ensuring that you're going to run over what they have.
Right, but the key point that you just made, right, is that you're only getting better. You're not getting more. And
Yeah.
in our discussion about card advantage, right, better is not necessarily more. Like, sure, it's like asking somebody, hey, what's heavier, a pound of rocks or a pound of cotton, right? It's like, well, they're the same weight, but in a situation where, let's say, you need to do a lot of physical damage to somebody. Sorry, this is getting a little violent, right? What would you rather have? You'd probably rather have a pound of rocks because, hey, rocks hurt. I don't care how much cotton you're throwing at me; it's probably never going to physically hurt, right? So it's like the cards you can weigh them. They'll be 1 and 1, but whichever one has a greater impact is what's going to really matter. So anyway, going aside from that, we've got by level. Let's get into some sample hands because we're hitting, I guess, the kind of the end of our cast here, right? And sample hands is something that I definitely want to do a lot more of in the future. It's a little bit more difficult to do in an article form because there's so much discussion about this, and I have to shout out to the Magic community, which got into a huge huff. They got everything all bunched up because of a question about, do you use this effect at the end of turn? Basically, to translate it into Weiss Schwarz terms, it's kind of, okay, do we brainstorm here or not? If you could use a brainstorm at the end of your opponent's turn. I know that's a lot. It's so different, but if you're a listener and you follow Magic, you might recognize this as the Merfolk Looter problem, where the Merfolk Looter lets you draw and discard a card. So for those of us in English who are going to be playing Kantai, Abyssals are coming out in the future, and one of the card's effects in blue is actually just strict draw and discard a card. Now imagine you can use that at any time, like at the beginning or end of your opponent's turn, right? And you have one of your best cards in hand, one of your best cards, not the best card, but one of your best cards. If you could, at the end of your opponent's turn, use that card's ability to draw and discard a card, would you, and why? Now, a lot of people got their pants all tangled up by saying, man, what about the context? And that's the thing that we're going to run into here, right? Where we have a problem with context. We're going to have to slow down. Everybody's going to go, what? What's going on here? But we got to ask ourselves some questions first. Like, what's the ideal hand and why? So, Clinton, if we were playing this deck, right, and we were looking at the same 50, what would you say is kind of the dream hand to start out with?
My dream opening hand would probably be, if I go first and go second, we sit.
Sorry, say again? Hold on. Looks like we just lost him for a second.
Hello?
Yeah, can you, are we back?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we
my
lost you
headset
for...
died from not charging it all weekend.
That's what it was.
Okay.
The cost of
Yeah.
being at Oranges. Okay, so anyway, back to the ideal hand. Like, what would be your ideal hand and why? Like, even if you're going first or second, you're saying.
Okay, my most ideal hand is, regardless of going first, second, is Reiner Kurita.
Mm-hmm.
Probably your best starter.
Yep.
And then preferably one of the Zekin Yukis, one of the Gold Bar Mother Rosarios to go with it. And the next two cards, it probably doesn't really matter because, I already have the three main cards I really want. I
Hmm.
would just like more like if it's another level zero, like one of the two bomb options we have in Silica and Yuki would be good.
Yep.
Or, give me, even level threes would be fine because, I have at least something I guaranteed that is considerably worse than my other cards to clock and draw for
Right.
a turn.
Yeah, see, that's the thing about at least this game that's nice, that even if we have useless cards that we ditch during Mulligan, we can still clock them and get new cards from that we won't know. So I like that, Clinton, for you, the ideal hand is actually only like 3 cards big, because it's like, yeah, once you have at least the knowledge of being able to guaranteed go off at level 1 with your CX combo and having something that will sneak in damage and get free stock. At least that's the ideal situation. With the run of Kirito, that's that's a great way of looking at it, I think.
Yeah, most of my games during the tournament, I average Mulligan 3,
Uh huh.
and the two that I normally kept was just my level 1 Yuki and a level 1, and no, and the Mother Rosario climax. Because with the amount of level zeros I played, I'm very likely gonna draw 'em.
Right, and I mean that was one of the first articles we did on 9CX. Is what's the actual number that we should use for level zeros in terms of what can we reliably get. Obviously, the game has changed a lot in 3 years, especially with level zeros getting progressively more and more useful, other than just straight beatdown. And so that kind of answers our next few questions. In fact, does it come before or after the mulligan? In this case, it kind of doesn't really matter. The 3 cards that we need, if we get them before or after, it's kind of good. And if it's a clean draw or not, like clean draw meaning that it doesn't have any climaxes in it. But in this case, this is one of the rare instances where having the climax in hand is actually a good thing. Where it's like, okay, we know we can use it, we know we can go off, and even if we draw a second copy, heck, I mean, if we want to go use it on separate turns like 1 and 1 or even 2-1, like search the deck for the other copies, it comes down to context of what happens in the game. That's probably why it doesn't really matter. So here's a really much more out there question. What should we do if the only level zero that we have is one of our brainstormers? Now, in the list that you have, right, we have a kind of a mix between the Sleeping Knights and Silica, right? You kind of mix the search and the salvage brainstormers. But let's say that we only draw one of those as our only level one. Let's say that we have like a disastrous opening, and we've pitched our whole hand, and we still, we get one of those level zeros. What would you do in that scenario, and why?
I always advocate that even no matter I just have a support back row character, I'm gonna attack with it. I need the stock, and especially for this deck, you need at least one just to go off with. Like you don't want the nightmare scenario of you just clock passing and then they get you to one, and now you really can't do anything.
That's a good point, because it's kind of rare, or at least difficult, to come back from that full level advantage scenario, right? If we can't get at least one stock. And this is, I mean, different because for those that read my BWC winning report, right? During even the I believe it was the semi, or I believe it was the semifinals, where I had a level zero, um, the salvage silica in my hand, but I actually just clocked and passed. Now, Nick rushed me to level 1, but I was still able to come back because, fortunately for me, I was able to, play out my combos thereafter. But in this deck, it's definitely not going to work out as well because, well, that one stock to even fire off a brainstorm or the Yuki is so much more critical for the upside that. Clinton, am I right to guess that the upside that you're going to get from being able to even go off, should like a disaster happen, you get level 1 in a single turn, to be able to fire off that combo and deny future damage and filter your hand to get better, is worth the risk of losing that single brainstorm early on?
Like especially for this deck, like even if you, because since they're like a combination of two core colors for level one,
Mm-hmm.
like the nightmare scenarios, you get to 0.6, now you only play half your level one. So even the level ones that you can play in hand, it's gonna still be a very poor board because they depend on how sizable your field is. And if you have to skip playing something at level zero or
Oh
attacking with
yeah,
it, the chance of you having even anywhere close to 3 to 4 characters on board is going to be extremely slim.
yeah. That could really come to bite you.
So
Huh.
instead of having one, subpar turn where I am attacking with one of my brainstormers, or the worst case scenario, Asana's Merry Life. You're now gonna have you could go from having no turn at all from just clock passing to a really bad level one to a slightly a less than desirable opening, but
but
then you
still
still have some
functional.
option to go with at one.
Right, exactly, but still functional. And the second question I was going to follow up on, but for support, and I would think that the answer is kind of the same, right? That if you even have one support, still crash it or just attack into nothing, because that's going to give you the best opportunity to win. Oh, but now that I think about it, here's a interesting question. Let's say that you're going second, right? And you only have they played the one level 0 that they've got, right? Because that's all that makes sense, more or less. They attack you. Would you side attack that level 0 to slow down the level 1, or would you just like say screw it? I'm gonna go into the side lane and direct attack you.
I guess that would depend on how many climaxes I'm out. If I'm out, at least one, like 2 to 3, then I would consider trying to get as much damage in
Right, you would
as I
consider
can,
racing.
because
Hmm.
yeah, because I'm very quickly gonna start eating a lot of damage too from having so many empty zones.
Right, but if you get like a clean 10, let's say that you like mulligan everything, you get all your level 3s, right? You just
Yeah.
and you get a clean 5, and you still don't see any climaxes in hand, you would potentially side attack that.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, there we go. A little bit. Anyway, for those of us who have not, if you haven't already pulled up the list, we have it right here: 18 level zeros, 12 level ones, 4 level 2s, 9 level 3s, which is not a real number because you can play 2 of them at level 2, and the 4-4 split of books and bars. We're just going to put this here for everybody's reference. So, with this in mind, and if you need to see the visuals for all the cards as they're introduced, we can go to 9cx.com and just look at the last week's article to see the fifth list down in our quintuple deck tech. So, all right, Clinton, this is the first time that you're going to be seeing these hands, and I just want to get us the kind of gut feeling for what we would mulligan from these hands. So, everybody, if you're watching at home, here we go. Here's our first hand. So, first, from this hand, we have a Runner Kirito. We have one of them with Trespass. We have the Asana's Merry Life support. We've got a Searcher, and we have a Clock Encore Sinon. So, because this is our first one, and I want to be told how wrong I am by Clinton, I'm going to posit that we might actually just want to discard the Trespass Kirito and the Clock on Corsinon, or the 3-2 and the 1-0. And I'm going to say that the reasons for that would be, well, let's see. We have one unknown that we're going to be drawing on our turn no matter what. We can clock one of the 3 mystery cards in that there are 2 cards that we're mulliganing. We're going to see one more. If one of them is a dud, we can clock. So we might be seeing up to 5 new cards by the time. If we need to set up for level 1, we can easily pitch one of those duds to the Kirito Searcher, and we're already going to be getting some value out of the Kirito Runner. So, Clinton, what do you think? How did I do?
I think it was pretty good. Sound logic. Personally, I would only mulligan the early Alkirdo, because right now with this hand, I have no signs of getting green going anytime soon,
Yep.
and the Merry Life, synergizes well with the Sinan, and then the Kirdo gives me a chance to, like, this hand tells me right now that I'm gonna lean blue, or blue at level 1 if I'm forced at 0.6. So the Kirdo, would just get me another Clock Encore Sinon, or maybe the Assassin Kirdo, and I could have a very respectable board at that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so you gotta keep, like, with that hand, you auto keep the Runner Kirdo.
Yeah, of course.
I wouldn't even, I wouldn't even be, totally surprised or displeased if somebody elects to mulligan everything but the Runner Kirito. Like, I could understand the justification of that.
Because there's, as you pointed out, right? This is all blue and yellow, and the yellow is most likely going to be played. So effectively, it's almost all blue, and It could differ based on. Well, technically, we're not supposed to look at our opponent mulligans. Like whenever I'm in one of these big tournaments, I always mulligan and declare face down, so that I don't give away and I don't receive any additional information. That's just kind of how the game goes when you play at that level, I think. So if we were assuming that we weren't going to give away that kind of information to our opponent before we actually locked in our mulligans, I think that that completely makes sense. That we might want to consider keeping the Sinon. I mean, obviously, if we so happen to hear what our opponent is playing, scouting and all that, that could influence our decision. But yeah, I think you might have a case for keeping the
Or
1-0 in the dark.
or if you're going second, you have the right to see what your opponent mulligans first
That's
before
true.
you
That's
get to
true.
mulligan.
That is true. That is true. Alrighty, let's move on to the second one. So this one is a little. I decided to do something a little bit more difficult for this one, right? We have our Yuki Reverser, we have the Married Life again, and we have a backup in Vice Commander Asuna and 2 gold bars. Now, from the previous one, right? If we look at that one, basically this is kind of a less than 50%. So a long time ago we did the math, and within the first turn of the game, you, the player, are kind of the better half of a coin's flip favored to see a climax. Seeing 2 is not outlandish, but it's a little bit less likely. But, I mean, sample hands are not to necessarily see what's most likely to happen, it's to see what should we do. So, looking at this, regardless of whether we're going first or second, Clinton, what would you do? Let's hear your thoughts on this one first.
So looking at this hand, like the for sure keeper card is the Clock Bomb Yuki.
Mm-hmm.
Like since if I see my opening have half of my core combo card, early core combo climax, I would have to keep at least one of those two. So far those would be the like one gold bar and one Yuki is what I would keep here for sure. I would consider keeping the Merry Life. That's in the super off chance I'm gonna like that could be my worst character to possibly use for hand encore on that Yuki.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm gonna for sure mulliganing the other Mother's Rosario, the Vice Commander, and the only toss up would be the Merry Life Asuna.
Yeah. So, how would you say that it's influenced if you go first or second? Because if we go first, right, we're going to be first to actually use the card, and we're probably going to be more likely to actually use the Married Life in a positive way, like using the plus power. But if we're on the draw, right, if we're going second, we technically get a little bit more information, right, in that they're going to most likely attack us first on the first turn.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you say that influences your decision? If we're going first, what would you? And if you're going second, given that we might know more about what's left in our deck and what might be on our hand with the Married Life, just with that one decision.
Yeah, if I go first, I would probably lean over over 50% on mulliganing 3, mulliganing away the 2 asanas and 1 gold bar. If I was going second, I'll
Mhm.
most likely keep at least 2 level zeros in that scenario.
Just in case of the absolute disaster that our mulligan just draws us into level 3s, and our draw is a level 3, and our clock draws us into a couple more level 3s or 2s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's reasonable. All right, let's go on to the next hand. Now, this one is a little bit messier, right? Because we see it's kind of mirroring the question that we had before, right? Of, oh dear, we only have brainstormers. What do? Right?
Mm-hmm. For that hand, I would no matter if I'm going first, second, I'm gonna mulligan the Sinan combo, and even if I don't really want to, I'll mulligan the Yuki, because worst case scenario, I have both my searching brainstorm and my salvaging brainstorm, so at least I could give up one of my 4 Yukis, and then give me slightly more options on drawing something better, and I have a means of having a chance to get easily accessible replacements.
Right, because if we mulligan away the Yuki, right, we can use the Silica potentially to get it back. If our draw does not yield a proper level 0, or we can just go big with the Sleeping Knights. Though in that case, I think I would just use the Silica to kind of guarantee that we're going to get something out. Like, The I could say the on the Japanese side of the game is particularly in Japan. The philosophy, the rating philosophy is and continues to be that searching for cards is more inherently more valuable than salvaging them, simply because of the potential damage denial. But in this case, because of the importance that we're placing on being able to actually reliably hit the level 1 CX combo, we might put a little bit more value on brainstorming to salvage, because that's actually guaranteed. Like, should we hit a climax during that brainstorm? Like, hitting a climax during brainstorm is never guaranteed, but we want to kind of not give ourselves another hoop to jump through, because if we strictly search, right, we don't necessarily account for the cards that we might be brainstorming away, and also the cards that we might be potentially taking as damage in between. Whereas if we discard it, it's going to be there. It's highly unlikely that our opponent's going to mess with our waiting room and send something to from our waiting room to stock or something or other. I just wanted to put the level 3 there to just see if anybody was going to be baited into keeping the level 3. I surely hope that if you're watching that that the game takes a lot longer than 5 minutes to get to level 3, barring absolute statistical disaster, and that it's absolutely correct. You won't hear any objection from me from mulliganing away the errant climax and the level 3 Sinon, and most likely the Yuki. All right, let's go on to the next hand, and so this hand is interesting because I might actually consider mulliganing away one of the silicas, simply because I want to cycle through my deck more quickly, and I already have a copy of the Mother's Rosario Climax in there. I already know that if I'm going first, I'm going to be playing the Runner Kirito, most likely, and I might or might not play the Gathering Materia Silica to filter through. It depends on like how many climaxes I might see in the first draw, simply because if I see an additional climax during the draw clock after that's resolved, the priority might be to filter through the deck more quickly or to sift through more quickly, because I certainly don't want to deny my opponent damage at level 0 so I can get to level 1, and I want to make it more likely to actually get to level 1 correctly. I mean, this sounds counterintuitive, right? Because we filter through to deny our opponent damage at level 0 with this, but at the same time, we also don't want to actually cancel too much with our level 0 as well, because if we get stranded at level 0, I mean, that's almost the case with any deck, right? Getting stranded at level 0 can be a potential for disaster. But that's my thinking for this, because, short of the Yuki, this is almost arguably the ideal hand for what we might want to see at level 0. Clinton, what do you think?
I think, if I was going second, I would probably highly likely keep that whole hand. If I was going first and I don't really need that many level zeros, I'll probably mulligan away one of the silicas and maybe the brainstormer too.
Really?
Yeah.
What's your reasoning for that?
Well, because I only really want to just have one character. I'm going to play my Kirito for sure first.
Uh-huh.
And I would consider filtering, but more likely I would try to show my opponent at least as little as possible on turn 1 and what I'm going to do. And at that point, I already have, because more often than not, that Kirito is most likely to survive, and I just really need one more level 0, which would be the Silica in my hand for my turn 2, where I'm probably at level 0, and I don't want to overextend and push my opponent into 1 prematurely.
Right, you just want to trade off instead of going for actual damage.
Yeah.
And if we brainstorm, or if we ditch the brainstorm, it gives us an additional draw to set up for the level 1, right? It's an additional draw for the Yuki, or even another brainstorm, right? So that we can go search it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I could see that. Again, just for everybody who's listening and watching, we're not necessarily 100% correct. We're getting our kind of first impressions of this, so again, if you have an opinion on this, I invite you to sound off in the comment section, because Clinton might be the world champion, but that doesn't mean that he might or might not be wrong about something. And I certainly can be prone to confirmation bias on these things, so other voices are definitely welcome. So we want this to be more participatory. So if you have, another situation or another point that you want to bring up, by all means, please tell us about it. We're not going to ever claim that we're absolutely correct about something and we're absolutely wrong about something. There's just so much data to process about this game, and which is why we do this, and why we play and why we are so into this. That it's one of the aspects of the game that keeps us coming back to. Is that that's part of the fun, at least for us. I don't know about you. It could be different. It could be the same, but
I love how it's constantly evolving. Nothing's ever really the same.
right? Yeah, that's the nice thing about having a TCG. Right? It kind of lives. Our evaluation might change drastically if something really punishes us for level zeros and whatnot. So we just want to get everybody into the whole mindset. So let's go to our fifth and final hand here, where we run into an interesting situation, right? Because your list runs a 1 of global support and searcher at level 1. We have a runner, but we have 2 off climaxes and a brainstormer. I don't want to really see, Clinton, what would you do here?
If I was going first, I would just keep the Kirito and Mulligan everything. I don't believe in the idea of, of not mulliganing more than one climax, to throw our opponents off, because I don't think that matters too much at 0.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just hurting yourself, especially if the climax you're holding for, bluffing purposes is not the core climax combo you're doing early.
Exactly. P.S. for bluffing purposes, for everybody that's concerned about the math, level 0, actually, if you draw 2 climaxes in your opening hand, it's, you're more likely going to actually go off at level 1 just because your opponent is that much more favored to hit you to level 1 first, unless they do something super sick like playing +2 soul and just like crashing into level 2, and those situations are so rare that they're not really worthwhile to mention per se. But I find it interesting that, Clinton, you would actually mulligan away the brainstormer as well, because I believe this list, if I'm not absolutely crazy, is running. Let's see, it's running 4 total brainstormers, right? So you would
3.
3. Excuse me. So you would still run or mulligan away 1 copy of the of the 4 brainstormers in the deck, just to be able to dig through the rest of the deck. Is that correct?
Yeah, because right now, especially with this hand, I'm like, oh, okay. Since I don't really have too much of anything to go off with besides, I have at least 1 attacking level 0.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the brainstormer is really that helpful, yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. And also something to note is that because we've already seen 2 climax, actually the number of times that we're going to be successfully hitting that brainstorm, should we get into a position that we can use it, is going to be that much lower, right? We're going to get that many fewer hits. And because if we discard only 3 cards, it's not even going 1 for 1. It's going to be that much worse. Don't get me started on the whole, you changed the outcome by measuring it. It's like, okay, quantum things aside, right? Even that, if you want to improve your chances by at least going 1 for 1. Because the super conservative player in me wants to actually keep that brainstormer, but I can see that just in the course of how this is being discussed, that there is error in my ways and that I probably should be mulliganing that, even if I can say that my fear, right, my visceral fear of being absolutely climax flooded is greater than the actual better expected value play or better EV play of ditching that brainstormer to get 4 fresh cards. So just so everybody knows, right, what I just did there was I made sure that I addressed an actual fear that I had, right, of not being able to refresh through the deck, and that's a long-term thing, right, quickly enough with the brainstormer to take that risk of what should be better than normal, right, better than 50% on average, to draw me into better cards. And so I'll challenge everybody to say, okay, identify this and just make sure that when you're looking at a kind of hand like this, especially with one that has a climax that you don't get to go off with immediately, that you just ditch it all except for the 1 level 0 that you for sure are going to play. But let's say that I'm an enormous troll and I want to change one thing. So let's change one thing. I'm still going to mark the sample hand 5 because we're just changing one thing, right? Yeah. How does the discussion change if we have a gold bar and a book instead of both books? Because with both books, right, it's kind of cut and dry. Just ditch the books, and move on with life. But what if one's a gold bar? Clinton, what do you think? What would you go with?
Well, back to the same, similar hand. If I was going second, I would keep the brainstormer just to have more level 0 options.
Sure.
But with this hand, I kind of like what I see. I would keep the brainstormer with the runner if I was going first.
Uh-huh.
And then, same thing, just increase my chance of, hey, now I know what I know I want to get. So I'm going to for sure, mulligan those 3 ways to increase my chances of drawing the 4 Yukis or, one of the other methods of fetching her.
So there's a number of arguments that I could potentially hear. Okay. Just bear with me with this. For mulliganing either 1 or 2 cards, right? Because if we mulligan only the climax, right? We only have one of the Leafa Searcher, but, and bear with me on this, we have a runner Kirito, right? And that's going to at least get us 1 or 2 stock, depending on how we do. And if we do that, we know that we at least have 1 green card that could either enable the Leafa Searcher and the climax, and therefore the combo, or, right, we have a brainstormer that can search into more green cards that can either set the Leafa up to be online or to use her as clog fodder. What do you think about this argument where we only mulligan the book away? And
I think,
to just keep, just to kind of go ham on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, backup, option 2 to do it because it's reasonable. And then, and you guarantee the 2 characters, worst case scenarios, you have 2 characters that are going to get you to 2 stock to make everything go.
Okay. Now, do you think that would change if we're going first or second? Or depending on which we go.
I think if we're going first, is the best case scenario to mulligan just the book.
Just the book, okay. So you could see that that's a defensible play, but you personally would probably mulligan the book and the Searcher?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so here it comes down to preference. Also because, the Leafa is just a one-of in this list. And it's like it's a cute tech. And that's the thing that I also wanted to touch on here because, sometimes you do run into corner case scenarios where you draw your one-of in a deck. And the thing about drawing one-ofs is that you're never going to get it again unless you keep it in your hand or unless you have some sort of way to salvage it back, that kind of thing. Whereas 2-ofs, you get a little bit more room, like you could reasonably pitch it. 3-ofs, it's kind of a done deal. 4-ofs, definitely, a done deal. You just let it go and you might be able to get it back. But, I just wanted to clear up for everybody that there might be a little bit of bias, right, inherent bias with just drawing a one-off and seeing how that might influence your decisions. So just be on the lookout for that. Anyway, that kind of wraps up our first round of sample hands. Want to thank you all for watching. Want to thank Clinton. Thank you for joining us for for this winning interview. Congratulations again.
Thank you, and thank you for having me again.
Yeah. Once again, our podcast was brought to you by Card Academy. Please, again, make sure to check them out for all the latest and greatest, including this set in English, Sword Art Online. And we will see you all next time. And, never know. We might have some more sample hands to do in the future. Please be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube if you would. And if you have a hand that you would like to kind of stump Clinton or me or both of us with, leave it in the comments and let's see if we can get to it, because there's a lot of play like there is here with every other deck, and there's still a lot more that we can talk about. Thanks for watching.